so ominous. It doesn't have to be that ominous. Welcome, you guys. Glad you're here at Life Point Crossing. My name, of course, is Ross, and I hope this doesn't come off as whiny. I hate whiny. I'm sure you also hate whiny. But I'm going to start by just sharing something about myself, and that is that I didn't really have what I would have considered a super happy childhood. Great home, great parents, all of that, that was all fine. But not a super unique story, really, but is just that after elementary school, once junior high and then most of high school, I didn't really have a lot for friends. And of course, in junior high or high school, that's about the worst thing that can happen. And of course, in junior high and high school, you are completely incapable of seeing past junior high and high school. And so there I was, and I was nice. I was always a nice kid. That was fine. But I was, if you can believe it, a little bit socially awkward, and I guess I wasn't that much fun, so I wasn't really popular with the guys, and I definitely wasn't popular with the girls. And I did have one really good friend, but he was in the grade behind me in school, which left me for school kind of all by myself. And so some of you know what this is like. You hated it when the teacher said, all right, everybody partner up, and you have to kind of look around and hope there's somebody else without a friend, or, break yourself into groups, and this is kind of someone going to have pity on me and say, Ross, you can come and be with us. And so that was really hard and awkward a lot, but it was okay. You could more or less mostly make it through the day. Here's what was really difficult about this, though, is that it left me completely vulnerable to being bullied by an individual whose name I won't say because it's the internet age and things are crazy, but you 100% know that I remember exactly. Some of you also, I'm sure, know what it's like. It wasn't just me. You wanted so desperately just to be part of the group, just to be to have some friends, and to maybe even, win the affection of some attractive member of the opposite sex. But you know what? Some of that was kind of a long shot. You understand that. So, the world doesn't owe me any of this. Those things might not exactly be for me. That's fair. But here's what would also be fair, is if I could just get up, go to school, do my thing, mind my own business, and then peaceably go back home to play Nintendo by myself after the 3:15 bell. The bully stole that from me. Your bully stole that from you if you were in a similar situation. And not every day, but enough days. And not just for a short period of time, but for several years. My physical weakness and social nothingness was made something of a public spectacle in front of whoever happened to be there, guys who maybe I wished I could be friends with or wanted to be invited to play ball with, the girl you liked, whoever. It was made very clear that I was weak and I was powerless, and nobody really cared enough about me to come to my defense. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so maybe these aren't related, I don't know, but through some of those years, I kind of developed into becoming a pretty angry kid. And I remember when things got a lot better for me towards the end of high school and for sure in college when this whole social dynamic kind of changed. But I remember the day, and really I remember the moment where I kind of recognized that I was sort of an angry person. Now, I wasn't violent, and I didn't cuss people out. I was always nice. That was never particularly difficult for me. But just about anything could set me off on an angry rant, and you couldn't stop it once it started. People would just groan if anybody mentioned anything like 20 miles that I could connect to government or politics, and there I went, and there was nothing that could be done, and it probably wasn't really that much fun to listen to. We were there in college, and the generals, why do I have to take these stupid classes that have nothing to do with what I'm really here to study? This is just like high school, except for, my goodness, you see what they're charging us for textbooks. The official at the game last night, he missed a call like he was some sort of a human being or something. Didn't matter, whatever it was. I could take just about anything and just go. And I remember that, I think I did kind of turn into I'd like to think a little bit of a fun guy. For sure, my social life did improve greatly once out of high school. But I remember when I kind of listened to some of the words that came out of my mouth, and they were really angry. And so that meant they were coming from an angry heart. That was going to chart an angry course for my life. Well, I didn't want that. And so here we are in this series on Black Box, and the concept is that each of us, our hearts, is very similar to a flight data collector, which is what they go find when an airplane crashes, and it tells them what went on and what happened so that they can investigate that and see, hopefully, that it doesn't happen again. And we saw that from Proverbs, it said, what above all else, guard your heart, because it determines the course of your life. And then Jesus said, here's a great tip for what can help with this, is that, you know what, your words, what you say flows from your heart. Really, even words that you might not say if you just happen to have an effective verbal filter and you can keep yourself from saying things that can get you in trouble. But still, these are coming from your heart. And so this is a really, really effective, fairly easy, or at least simple way to come face to face with some of the junk and some of the ugliness that's been floating around in our hearts so that we can deal with it and chart a better course for our life. And so I know I didn't want to chart an angry course for my life. I'm guessing that probably nobody does. None of you either. I wonder if I'm the only person here that's ever heard some of the words coming out of my heart that they were pretty angry and thought, that really isn't who or what I want to be. So, of course, the good news is that Jesus and the Bible also don't want you to be an angry person who lives an angry life. And so we all agree on this. Isn't this nice? And here's a verse from God through Paul telling us this in Ephesians 4:31. It says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. And there you see our word anger right in the middle there, surrounded by some other words that are really very, very similar and closely related, of course, right? Rage and bitterness and harsh words, all kind of very close cousins to anger. And God through Paul saying that, okay, we need to get rid of that. Great. If you're like me, maybe you have a couple impediments to that, however. First of all, number one, there's a reason you're angry. Just wake up, decide to be angry. And then number two, of course, I don't know if it's that easy to just get rid of. So maybe I'm the only one. I hope not. It would be very fun if I was not the only one. But if you remember or if you noticed in Dumb and Dumber, the scene in the diner with Seabass, where Harry and Lloyd approach the counter to say that, yeah, Seabass said he wants to pay for our lunch. The server there is reading a book. And I always thought this was just hilarious, that if you can see, the name of the book is, she's there reading, of course you're angry. I just think it's so funny. I'm glad at least Jim's chuckling a little bit, because I don't even know if it's supposed to be funny, but I find that hilarious. But the book presumes something. The title of the book presumes something, right? There's a reason. Something happened. Of course you're angry. There I was as something was happened to you. It was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. Somebody did something to you. At the very least, you in some way didn't get your way. So of course you're angry. I was there as a college student working hard in the kitchen at the Happy Chef restaurant in Marshall, Minnesota, and the government was taking money right out of my check. Of course I was angry. The runner stepped out at the 20. The official wasn't in position to see it. The other team got a bogus touchdown. Of course I was angry. A bully terrorized me for multiple years growing up, stripping away any potential or maybe even just hypothetical chance I could have at any sort of social standing. Of course I was angry. And I don't know what has happened to create anger in your heart, but I would expect that for a lot of us, it's probably something that we would even judge to be a lot worse than having a little bit of a rougher childhood. For some of you, it's someone did something specifically and intentionally that was really damaging to you. You were vulnerable and they took advantage of you in some way, physically or emotionally or sexually or financially or whatever it was, and it was wrong and it was bad, and we would all be angry. Of course you're angry. Others of you, maybe it wasn't something that was intentional to hurt you, but it still did what it did. It wasn't to hurt you necessarily, but maybe your dad bailed on you and your mom when you were a kid, and it wasn't trying to hurt you, but still you grew up with a shattered family and without a daddy who loved you, and to come to your baseball games and your band concerts. And so regardless of why it happened, still there you were, left to grow up without the dad that you feel like you should have had, and you were had stolen from you the childhood that you deserved. Of course you're angry. Well, of course you're angry. But also, whatever has been done cannot be undone, with very, very rare exception. This is just true, isn't it? And so often we sit around holding on to anger as though we're waiting for or expecting whoever did whatever they did to us to come and make it right and to take that away. Almost all the time, it's absolutely impossible for that to happen. The bully cannot return my childhood dignity. It happened. It's done. It's gone. Your dad can't come back and be there for the picture on your first day of school and look at you and smile and tell you that he's proud of you after your fourth grade band concert and tuck you in and tell you everything's going to be okay after your first boyfriend dumped you. Your cheating ex-wife isn't going to be able to vacuum out the feelings of betrayal that exist now in your heart. It simply cannot be undone. And so, of course, you're angry. It's reasonable that you are angry. Something happened, it was wrong or bad, but it is not reasonable to remain angry. In other words, what you feel is probably very, very fully justifiable, but what it's not is it's not helpful. And in fact, it is unhelpful. And as we hold on to that anger, here's what that does, is it doesn't hurt the person who hurt us. It really just keeps hurting ourselves. It just allows us to continue being hurt and controlled by whatever happened much, much longer after whatever it is done. That's a really kind of that's just nonsense, isn't it? So even if there's a good reason for you to be angry, it's not a good reason to remain angry. So, okay, we kind of all were for this in the first place. None of us wanted to be angry, so we'd all love to get rid of it, just like Jesus and the Bible say. Okay, who wouldn't want to live a life of peace and serenity in a land of lollipops and rainbows? But it'd be nice if we could get a little bit of help in getting there, right? Because you can't just get rid of anger the same way you take your trash bin out on a Tuesday evening and then someone comes and takes it away. And so probably the truth is every one of us finds at least some anger in our hearts if we're paying any attention and being honest with ourselves. But we're going to need a little more help than just smile and love Jesus. Well, wouldn't you know it? Paul, writing Ephesians, has in fact anticipated your question and offers you the key in the very next verse. Get rid of anger and all of those things. Here's what comes next. He says, instead, here's what you do. Be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. And there it is. The way to deal with anger in your heart is forgiveness from your heart. And if you know me, forgiveness is one of my absolute favorite topics and things to talk about. And if you were here a couple years ago, we did a full 6-week series on it. Half of you weren't here, half of you who were here don't remember it, but there's only so far we can go for just today. But I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what forgiveness is and is not. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Like if you still remember, then you haven't forgiven. That's nonsense. It's not saying that nothing happened or that whatever happened was okay. If those were the case, there would be nothing to forgive in the first place. It's not setting yourself or others up for repeatedly being abused or taken advantage of. It's none of that at all. Here's what forgiveness is. It's just very simply this. Forgiveness is canceling the debt that you feel like someone owes to you that they probably can't pay anyway. And when you're able to forgive them from your heart, now what does anger have left to hold on to? And now we're starting to really guard our heart against this anger, just like Proverbs was talking about. And so this is obviously a little bit of a false dichotomy, but if you have a choice between living an angry life or a life of forgiveness, which one of those is better? Which one of those is more helpful for you? Which one of those is more healthy? Which one of those is more beautiful? Oh, I mean, the answer is obvious, right? And if I'd like to pile on, I would talk about all those messages from a couple of years ago where we said things like forgiveness means freedom and healing. Forgiveness means destroying hypocrisy. Forgiveness means letting people be human and God be God. Forgiveness means healthy relationships. And as the capstone, forgiveness means being like Jesus. When you add dealing with anger in your heart to those, boy, forgiveness can do quite a bit for you, can't it? And so I would love if right now every one of us was like, yeah, I'm in. Let's go, let's do it. I'm going to try and listen, but also really I'm just thinking about all the things I've been holding on to and anger in my heart, and I'm sitting here and I am just forgiving, and just feeling that healing and wholeness rush in. God bless you if that's you. I'm very excited about that. I'm suspicious that it might not be everybody. I'm suspicious that some of us might need one more push. And maybe, in fact, it's because you pay very close attention. And Ross, what was the ... at the end of verse 32 there? Why did that get cut off? What did you not want us to see? What are you hiding? I'm glad you pay attention. Here's what it said. Be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Now that adds an element, doesn't it? The Bible is very, very clear that the debt that we owe to God is infinitely more than we could ever pay. That He created a perfect, wonderful world. And whatever you think about how it happened or how we got here, you know that the world did not begin full of lying and anger and hatred and warfare and sexual abuse and greed and all of these terrible things. And so this is what we've done as humanity, as a human race, and each one of us has contributed also as an individual. And I think sin is more even than just that. But even just on that level, like we have done this wrong against the holy, perfect God who created all this, and we can't take it back. We can't make it like it was. So what? Sorry. Well, sorry doesn't make right the wrong. The good news is that Jesus tells us a story recorded in Matthew chapter 19. Here's what he says. He says, therefore the kingdom of heaven, which I have interest in, can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. In the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. Well, he couldn't pay. So the master did what they did. They ordered that he be sold along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. This is a clear picture of you and me before God. And we owe a debt that is absolutely impossible for us to pay. It's absolutely hopeless for us. But the good news is Jesus keeps talking. The man fell down before his master and begged him, please be patient with me and I will pay it all, which is total nonsense. He's a servant. He owes millions of dollars. He can't pay it all. It would take dozens of lifetimes for him to pay it back. So it's a nice sentiment, but it's also completely absurd and beyond unrealistic. But then the master was filled with pity for him, so he released him, and not even released him to repay his debt, but released him and forgave his debt. And so, of course, this is a picture of us being forgiven by God through Jesus Christ. And oh my goodness, what kind of an incredibly merciful, loving, gracious, forgiving God is this? But the bad news is Jesus keeps talking. When the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. And of course, you're smart and you can figure this out, but this is now a picture of us who now we are holding anger and unforgiveness from another human being that's on the same level as we are. And here's what he does is, well, his fellow servant fell down before him and begged for a little more time, very similar to what this man just did before the king. And he said, please be patient with me and I will pay it, he pleaded. But his creditor wouldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until he could, the debt could be paid in full. What do you think of this guy now? Probably not a big fan. What would you think if you saw all this happen? Probably you'd be pretty upset with him, and you'd be in very good company. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. Then the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, you evil servant. Very terrifying words, really. I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? Of course. And then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt, which we've already established will never happen. And that's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters. Look, from your heart. See, in a moment or in a vacuum, the decision to forgive somebody who has wronged you feels wrong. It feels like you're rewarding them for their evil, or that you're on some way letting them off the hook for what happened. It feels wrong. But we're not in a vacuum. We are the servant who has been forgiven far, far more than any human being could ever possibly owe us. And that is with the explicit understanding and expectation that we will then pass that on to the people in our lives. The same way that forgiveness in a vacuum feels wrong, not forgiving in our actual situation is so insane it's off the charts. And so whether you even believe in God or the Bible or things like this parable that Jesus talks about or the concept of sin or God, whether you even believe in any of that or not, this message is still true and beautiful. The cure to anger in your heart is forgiveness from your heart. Whatever anybody believes, Gandhi or the Dalai Lama might be just as big of a fan of forgiveness as I am because it's real and it's healthy and it works. But part of the reason why I am so enthusiastic about it is because it's been incredibly powerful in my life, as God has used forgiveness to help transform me from that angry kid to today where I'm in a much, much, much better place, I feel like. And of course, I forgave that bully decades ago. And I'm very pleased with the way this has worked out because I don't want to be an angry person who charts an angry course for my life. But as forgiven sinners, man, it takes on an entirely new dimension, doesn't it? We're angry and unforgiving because we want what's right. And we demand justice for the wrongdoing. But Jesus, in this parable, clearly lays out the fact that what feels like our private little vendetta for justice is really a stupid, spoiled kid who's unwilling to share his good fortune. It comes from his heart, and it charts a very specific course for his life. And you can choose that if you want to. It's your heart, it's your life. But I want to choose the way of Jesus. I want to choose the way of forgiveness. Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you are such a loving, merciful, glorious, generous, forgiving God, and that you make that available to us, every one of us, whatever it is that we have or haven't done, whatever it is that we have or haven't been through, that you make that freely available for us. creatures who you have just decided to love and care for. Still praying if you're here and for whatever reason you've never put your faith in Jesus to experience his forgiveness, be forgiven and adopted as a child in his family. It's as simple as can be. Every one of us has done wrong. There are things we knew they were wrong. We did them anyway. That's sin. And for God to be a just judge, he can't just pretend that wrongdoing didn't happen or look the other way. That would be a terrible, unjust judge. And we cannot repay, but that's why Jesus not just came and told us nice parables and stories to help us have healthier hearts, but to come and live and die and resurrect so that we could be forgiven, that his death on the cross was substitutionary for us, for me and for you. That was him taking my place, your place, and satisfying justice for our sinfulness and our wrongdoing himself. And if that's you, just right where you sit, you can say out loud or in your heart, or if you're watching online, wherever the case, just pray and say to God, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and resurrected so I could be forgiven and adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into the person you created me to be, and give me the life that you have for me. And if you just prayed a prayer like that, it's not the words of prayer that saves you. You put your faith in Jesus, and God's grace comes to you through that. That is what the forgiveness comes through, and you are a new spiritual creation in Jesus Christ. We could not be more excited. This is why Life Point Crossing exists. If this is you, just the best thing you can do from here is just let somebody know. You can go out to the Point. That's just the corner in the lobby, and let them know the decision you made. They'll take your information so we can follow up with some good, healthy next steps. If you're watching online, send us a message. It's the same. For those of us who have accepted that forgiveness and been following Jesus, I know every one of us still struggles with this on one level or another. Some of us a little bit, some of us very profoundly. What is it that you need to forgive? Where is that anger coming from in your heart? Where can you be the opposite of that awful servant and be the person who Jesus really points you to, who forgives from your heart? It is better for you, it is better for them, and it is exactly what your gracious, forgiving Father both has offered and expects from you. Will you, between yourself and the Spirit of God, just work that out? Begin to free them from, cancel the debt that you feel like somebody owes you in your heart. I'm not saying that what they did wasn't wrong and that it didn't hurt you, maybe very, very, very profoundly. What I'm saying is that forgiveness is the way forward and the way toward Christ-likeness and being the person who he created you to be. Father, this is so difficult for so many of us. It's simple, but it is not easy. And so we specifically ask for your Spirit to be active and at work in each of our hearts as we work toward this and offer to others the same forgiveness that you have offered to us in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.